It started with a chance encounter on a rainy evening, when I offered a stranger on the street a place to stay for just one night. He was quiet, his eyes carrying a weight I couldn't name, and his story was written in the lines of his face. I told myself it was only temporary, that I was simply doing a good deed. But when I discovered the truth about him, everything changed, including me. This is not just about compassion, but about how a single decision to open your door can lead to revelations you never imagined. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications, because what I'm about to share will make you see love, trust, and second chances in a way you never expected. The night I first saw him is etched in my memory like a photograph. It was late October, and the rain was coming down hard, hammering the pavement as if trying to wash the city clean of its sins. I had left work later than usual, exhausted and more than a little numb, my mind already on the warm apartment that waited for me. That's when I saw him. He was crouched near the corner of a closed bookstore, his body pressed against the wall for shelter. His clothes were soaked through, and his beard clung to his face, dripping with rain. What caught me, though, wasn't the state of his body but the expression in his eyes. They weren't the hollow, distant eyes I had seen in so many people living on the streets. His were sharp, searching, as if he had once known another life and hadn't quite let it go. I slowed my steps. Something inside me told me to keep walking, that it wasn't my problem. That's what most people do, right? Pretend not to see. But as I turned my head forward, I swear I felt his gaze follow me, almost pulling me back. My shoes splashed in a puddle, and before I could overthink it, I stopped. "Hey," I said, my voice barely carrying over the sound of the rain. He lifted his head slightly, cautious, as if even a simple greeting was a trap. I swallowed. Do you need a place to stay for the night?" The words surprised me as much as they seemed to surprise him. He blinked at me, his brows furrowing, as if I had just asked him something absurd. I immediately regretted it. What was I doing inviting a stranger into my home? "Why?" he asked, his tone rough, as though suspicion was the only thing keeping him safe. "Because you'll get sick out here," I replied, trying to sound steadier than I felt. "I live a couple of blocks away. Just for tonight." He didn't answer right away. I could see the battle happening behind his eyes, distrust against desperation. Finally, he nodded, but it was hesitant, like he wasn't fully convinced this was a good idea. As we walked, side by side in the rain, I kept stealing glances at him. He was tall, maybe mid-30s, though the years on the street had aged him. His shoulders were broad, his hands calloused, and yet there was a quiet dignity in the way he carried himself. Not the defeated slouch I expected, but something steadier, more resilient. When we reached my apartment, I half expected him to stop at the door, to refuse to step inside. Instead, he wiped his feet carefully on the mat, as if not to dirty my floor, and then stood awkwardly in the entryway. "You can shower if you want," I said, pointing toward the bathroom. "I'll get you some clothes." For a moment, he didn't move. Then, with a slight nod, he disappeared down the hall. I dug through my dresser for sweatpants and a t-shirt, wondering what I had just gotten myself into. When he emerged again, steam rising from the bathroom behind him, he looked like a different person. His beard was trimmed short, his hair slicked back from the water, and the oversized clothes hung loosely from his frame. But his eyes, those same eyes I had seen in the rain, they seemed clearer now, less guarded. "Thank you," he said softly. The sound of gratitude in his voice was almost painful, like he hadn't said those words in a long time. We sat at the small kitchen table while I heated soup from a can. He ate slowly, methodically, as though he was trying not to devour it all in one bite. I wanted to ask him everything, how he had ended up there, who he was, where he had come from. But I bit my tongue. I figured he'd tell me when he was ready. After a while, he set the spoon down and leaned back in his chair. "My name's Aaron," he said, almost reluctantly. I nodded. "Daniel." Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like the kind of silence where both people are thinking too much to speak. As the rain beat against the windows, I caught myself watching the way his jaw tensed when he thought, the way his eyes scanned the room as if memorizing it. He didn't look like a man who belonged on the street. He looked like someone who had been misplaced, like a book filed on the wrong shelf. When it was time to sleep, I offered him the couch. He hesitated, glancing at me as if to confirm I was serious, and then settled in. I lay awake in my bed, listening to the faint sound of his breathing through the wall. I didn't know what would happen in the morning. Maybe he'd be gone. Maybe I'd regret opening my door. But something deep inside me, something I couldn't quite name, whispered that this was just the beginning of something I wasn't ready for but desperately needed. And when I finally drifted to sleep, the thought lingered like a secret in the dark. Why did I feel safer knowing he was under my roof than I had ever felt when I was alone? When morning came, I half expected Aaron to be gone. I imagined walking into the living room and finding the couch empty, the blanket folded neatly, as if he had never been there at all. Instead, when I opened the door, I saw him sitting upright, staring out the window at the street below. The blanket had slipped to the floor, forgotten. For a moment, he didn't notice me. The sunlight fell across his face, softening the sharp angles, and for the first time, I could almost see the man he must have been before the streets left their mark. There was something haunting in that image, a glimpse of who he was beneath the layers of survival. "Coffee?" I asked quietly, not wanting to startle him. He turned his head, meeting my eyes with a kind of guarded calm. Thanks." I brewed 2 cups, and we sat across from each other again, the table between us like some invisible barrier neither of us dared to cross. He held the mug with both hands, letting the steam warm his fingers. "You didn't have to let me stay," he said after a long pause. "I know," I admitted. "But I wanted to." That seemed to catch him off guard. His brow furrowed as if trying to figure me out. I thought maybe he would leave it at that, but then he asked, "Why?" The truth was, I didn't really know. There were plenty of reasons not to let a stranger into my home. Logic would say I was reckless, naive even. But there was something about him, something in his eyes last night that told me he needed more than just a place to dry off. "I guess I just didn't want to walk away," I said finally. He nodded slightly but didn't press further. I could tell he wasn't used to people giving without expecting something in return. The day passed slowly. I had work emails to answer, errands to run, but I found myself distracted, listening for movement in the apartment. Every sound of shifting fabric or the creak of the couch made me pause, aware of his presence in a way that felt unfamiliar but not unwelcome. By late afternoon, I returned from the store with groceries. He stood by the counter, clearly uncomfortable, like he didn't know if he was allowed to open the fridge or even stand in the kitchen. "You don't have to act like a guest," I told him. "If you're here, you're part of this space." His lips pressed together in a way that looked almost pained. "I haven't been part of anything in a long time," he said softly. The words sank into me deeper than I expected. I wanted to ask what he meant, but I could see how heavy even that admission had been for him. So instead, I handed him a bag of vegetables. "Then start here. Help me cook." He gave a small, surprised laugh, and for a moment, it was as if the weight lifted from his shoulders. Side by side, we chopped and stirred. It wasn't much, but it felt like building something together, however fragile. That night, after dinner, we sat in the living room with the TV humming quietly. I noticed how his gaze lingered not on the screen but on the framed photo on the shelf, a picture of me and my late father fishing by the lake years ago. "Your dad?" Aaron asked. "Yeah," I said. "He passed when I was 24. Aaron looked down at his hands, his jaw tightening. "I lost my old man too. Different reasons, same emptiness." I waited, sensing he might continue, but he didn't. He just leaned back, the silence hanging between us heavier than before. When I stood to put away the dishes, I caught his voice low behind me. "I wasn't always like this." I turned. His eyes stayed on the floor. "I had a job. A family. Then one mistake, one thing after another, and it all slipped." I wanted to step closer, to tell him he didn't have to explain himself to me. But instead I just asked, "Do you want to tell me?" He shook his head. "Not yet." I nodded, respecting the boundary. Still, something about the way his shoulders trembled made me want to reach out and steady him. Later that night, as he settled back onto the couch, I lingered at the doorway longer than I meant to. "Good night, Aaron." His eyes met mine, softer this time. "Good night, Daniel." I closed the door to my room, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside me had shifted. This wasn't just about helping someone anymore. I was drawn to him, to the way his walls seemed ready to crumble if only someone cared enough to stay. As I lay awake, I wondered if I was in over my head. But another part of me, the part one couldn't quiet, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was exactly where I was meant to be. The knock at the door came early, sharp and insistent, echoing through the apartment in a way that made my chest tighten. Aaron stiffened on the couch, clutching the blanket like a shield. His eyes darted to mine, and in them I saw a fear I didn't fully understand. I held up a hand. "It's fine. Probably a neighbor." But the truth was, I wasn't sure. My building was quiet, the kind of place where most people kept to themselves. Rarely did anyone come by unannounced. I opened the door cautiously, only to find Mrs. Green from down the hall. She was in her 70s, a widow with a sharp tongue and an even sharper sense of curiosity. Her gaze swept past me and into the living room where Aaron sat, and I saw the way her eyes narrowed. "Daniel," she said in her clipped tone, "I couldn't help but notice you have company." I swallowed. "Just a friend staying for a while." Her eyes lingered on Aaron, suspicion etched deep in the lines of her face. "Just be careful. People aren't always what they seem." With that, she turned and shuffled back down the hall, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding. When I closed the door, Aaron looked pale. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded too quickly. "Yeah. Just, neighbors can tell when someone doesn't belong." The way he said it made me. I wanted to remind him that belonging wasn't about what others saw, but about what you allowed yourself to claim. Still, I let it go. For now. The day dragged on with a strange tension between us. I worked from my laptop at the kitchen table, but every time I glanced up, I found Aaron restless, pacing, fidgeting, staring at the window like the world outside was both a threat and a temptation. Finally, I closed the laptop. "You want to get some air? We can go for a walk." His shoulders stiffened. "Crowds aren't really my thing." "Not a crowd," I said gently. "Just a walk. No one's going to judge you for stretching your legs." He hesitated, then nodded. We went out together, the late afternoon sun spilling over the cracked sidewalks and the distant hum of traffic filling the air. Aaron kept his hands shoved deep into the pockets of the jacket I'd lent him, his eyes scanning every face we passed. At one point, a group of teenagers laughed loudly near the corner. Aaron froze, his whole body tense, as if he expected the laughter was aimed at him. I touched his arm lightly. "They're just kids messing around." His jaw unclenched, but only slightly. "You don't get it," he muttered. I wanted to ask what he meant, but I stayed quiet, sensing that forcing it would only push him further away. By the time we got back, he looked exhausted, like even that short walk had drained him. He dropped onto the couch, closing his eyes. "You don't have to push yourself," I said softly. "Not with me." His eyes opened, and for a moment, the mask slipped. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Scared of being seen. Scared of being nothing." My throat tightened. "You're not nothing. Not to me." The silence that followed was heavy, charged with something I couldn't quite name. That night, after dinner, I found him looking again at the photo of my dad. His fingers brushed the edge of the frame, almost reverently. "You must have been close," he said. I nodded. He was my anchor. When he died, I felt like I was drifting. Aaron's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "I know that feeling." It was the first time he'd spoken so openly, and I didn't want to break the moment. So I asked carefully, "What happened to your family?" He swallowed hard. "I had a brother. Younger. I was supposed to take care of him. But I didn't. I let things fall apart. When I lost my job, I lost him too." The pain in his words cut deep. I wanted to reach across the space between us, to close the distance, but I held back, afraid of scaring him away. Instead, I said, "You're here now. That has to mean something." He looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time, I saw hope flicker in his eyes. Later, as we both prepared for bed, I caught him standing in the doorway of the guest room. "Daniel," he said, his voice low, "why are you doing this?" "Why me?" I hesitated. The truth burned in my chest, but I wasn't sure I was ready to say it out loud. So I answered carefully, "Because everyone deserves a chance to feel safe. And maybe because I see something in you worth fighting for." His expression softened, but there was still a storm behind his eyes. He nodded once, then closed the door. As I lay awake, my mind replayed the look on his face, the way his defenses had cracked just enough to show the wounded man beneath. I knew then that whatever path we were on, it was leading me deeper than I had planned, and maybe deeper than I was ready for. But a part of me, the part that had been restless for years, whispered that this was the beginning of something I couldn't turn away from. The phone rang just after breakfast. I was rinsing dishes in the sink when the sharp tone broke through the quiet of the apartment. Aaron, who had been sitting on the couch with a mug of coffee cradled in his hands, flinched like it was a gunshot. His eyes darted to the phone on the counter. "Want me to get it?" I asked, drying my hands. He shook his head quickly, but I could see the tension stiffening his shoulders. I answered anyway. "Hello." The voice on the other end was male, gravelly and cautious. "Is Aaron there?" I hesitated, glancing toward him. His eyes widened, panic flashing across his face. He shook his head violently, mouthing no. "Who's asking?" I said, trying to keep my tone steady. "This is his brother," the voice replied. "Please. I've been looking for him." I turned my gaze back to Aaron, who now looked like he might bolt out the front door. His face was pale, his breathing uneven. "Hold on," I said into the phone, then pressed it against my chest. "It's your brother," I whispered. Aaron's hands clenched around the coffee mug until I thought it might shatter. "I can't," he said hoarsely. "I can't face him. Maybe he just wants to know you're okay." Aaron shook his head again, his eyes wet. "No, Daniel. You don't understand. I left him. I let him down when he needed me most. He'll hate me." The weight in his voice made my chest ache. I wanted to shield him from that pain, but I also knew running from it wasn't the answer. Still, I respected the plea in his eyes. "I'm sorry," I told the caller, keeping my voice even. "I can't help you." And I hung up. The silence that followed was suffocating. Aaron set the mug down carefully, as if afraid even the smallest sound might break him. "Thank you," he whispered. But gratitude wasn't what I saw in his face. It was guilt, raw and unrelenting. The rest of the day he barely spoke. He moved through the apartment like a shadow, avoiding my eyes, disappearing into the guest room for long stretches. When I finally knocked on the door that evening, I found him sitting on the floor, his back against the bed frame, staring at nothing. "You don't have to tell me," I said gently, lowering myself to sit beside him. "But I want to understand." For a long time he was quiet. Then, finally, his voice broke through the silence. "My brother's name is Matthew. He's 3 years younger than me. When our parents died, it was just us. I promised him I'd take care of him. But when I lost my job, I couldn't pay rent. I turned to things I shouldn't have, drinking, bad company. One night, he asked me if we'd be okay, and I couldn't even answer. The next day I walked out. I told myself it was better for him not to see me fall apart, but I abandoned him, just like everyone else had." His words cracked in places, and I wanted to reach out, to hold him, but I didn't. I let him finish. When I heard his voice just now, he pressed his fists against his temples. I couldn't do it. I couldn't let him hear me like this. I'm still nothing. I'm still that failure. I exhaled slowly. "Aaron, you're not nothing. You're here. You've survived things most people couldn't. And maybe you've made mistakes, but you're not beyond forgiveness. Not from him. Not from me." His eyes met mine, searching, vulnerable. "Why do you believe in me?" "Because I see you trying. Because I've seen the way you care, even when you think no one notices. You're more than the worst thing you've done." His eyes shimmered with unshed tears, and for a moment, the distance between us felt unbearable. I wanted to close it, to bridge it with touch, with something undeniable. But before I could, he stood abruptly, his hands shaking. "I need air," he muttered, rushing past me. I followed him out to the balcony. The night air was cool, the city humming softly below us. Aaron gripped the railing, his knuckles white. "I've spent years hating myself," he said, his voice raw. "Years believing I didn't deserve to be seen. But with you, Daniel, it's different. And that scares me more than anything else." I stepped closer, careful not to startle him. "Different how?" He turned his head, and in the dim glow of the streetlights, I saw the truth written across his face. "You make me feel like I'm worth something. And I don't know what to do with that." My heart pounded. "Maybe you don't have to do anything right now. Maybe you just let yourself feel it. One step at a time." He stared at me, his breath uneven, and for a second, I thought he might reach for me. Instead, he whispered, "What if I ruin this too?" "Then we pick up the pieces," I said softly. "Together." The silence stretched, heavy and electric. Then he leaned in, just slightly, as if testing the air between us. I felt the gravity of it, the inevitability, but before anything more could happen, a noise from the street below snapped us apart. A car horn, sharp and jarring. Aaron stepped back quickly, retreating into the apartment, leaving me on the balcony with my heart racing. Inside, he paused by the couch, his voice trembling. "Daniel, I don't know if I can do this. But I want to try. I need you to promise you won't give up on me." I swallowed hard, my chest tight with everything I wanted to say. "I won't." And yet, as I lay awake later, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that the past wasn't finished with him. That the phone call was just the beginning. The knock at the door came just as the sun was sinking, the last light bleeding across the apartment floor in orange streaks. I froze mid-step, my hands damp from washing vegetables. Aaron was pacing the living room like he had all day, restless, unable to settle. The sound made him stop dead in his tracks. He looked at me, fear carved into every line of his face. "Don't answer it." But the knock came again, harder this time. Whoever it was wasn't leaving. My chest tightened as I crossed to the door and opened it just enough to see. Standing there was a man maybe a few years younger than Aaron. His hair was shorter, neater, but his eyes, those piercing hazel eyes, were almost identical. His posture carried a weight that looked too heavy for his age. He stared at me like he was searching for answers. "I'm looking for Aaron," he said. His voice wasn't angry, but it wasn't gentle either. Behind me, I felt Aaron stiffen. He didn't speak. "It's him, isn't it?" the man said, his gaze shifting past me, landing on the figure frozen in the living room. "It's really you." Aaron's lips parted, but no words came out. He just stood there, pale and trembling. I stepped aside carefully. "Come in." The man walked in slowly, his eyes never leaving Aaron. "You disappeared," he said. His voice cracked, and that raw edge of pain carried more force than anger ever could. "One day you were there, and then you weren't. I thought you were dead." Aaron lowered his gaze, his voice finally breaking free. "Matthew." The name landed heavy in the room. It was like saying it out loud made everything undeniable. Matthew let out a shaky breath. "I spent years wondering. I checked shelters, hospitals. I prayed I wouldn't find your name on a list in the morgue." His voice cracked again. "And all that time, you were alive." Aaron swayed a little, as if the words had hit him like blows. "I didn't deserve to be found," he whispered. Matthew's fists clenched. "You didn't get to decide that. You were my brother. You promised we'd always be together. And then you left me with nothing but silence." Aaron looked like he was breaking apart piece by piece, and I couldn't just stand there. I stepped forward. "He's been punishing himself every single day for that. You think he didn't care?" "He never stopped carrying the weight of what happened." Matthew turned to me sharply. "And who are you?" "Someone who sees him for who he is now," I said, steadying my voice. "Not just who he was when he walked away." Aaron shook his head violently, his voice raw. "Don't defend me, Daniel. He deserves the truth." I left. I failed him. The room was thick with emotion, the air almost too heavy to breathe. Matthew's voice softened, though his eyes stayed sharp. "Do you know what it was like, waiting every day for a word that never came? Do you know what it's like to keep a light on for someone who never walked through the door? Aaron finally lifted his gaze, tears spilling freely now. I thought leaving was protecting you. I thought if you didn't see me spiral, you'd be better off. That's not protection, Matthew shot back. That's abandonment. The words hung there, brutal and undeniable. Aaron's legs gave out, and he sank onto the couch, his face buried in his hands. I know what I did. And I hate myself for it. Every time I close my eyes, I see your face the night I left. I hear your voice asking if we'd be okay. And I couldn't answer, Matthew. I couldn't even look you in the eye. The silence that followed was shattered only by Aaron's ragged breathing. I wanted to bridge the distance between them, to pull them both into something steady, but this wasn't mine to fix. Matthew's voice broke the silence at last. You could have called. One letter. One word. Aaron lifted his head, eyes swollen with grief. I thought I lost the right. For the first time, Matthew's face softened, the anger giving way to a sorrow so deep it looked endless. He sank into the chair opposite his brother. His hands shook as he spoke. I hated you. I hated you for years. But I still hoped. And now seeing you here, his voice wavered. I don't even know what to feel. Aaron leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. You don't owe me forgiveness. I don't expect it. But I need you to know, I never stopped loving you. I never stopped wishing I'd been stronger. The honesty in his voice left the room trembling. For a long time, Matthew didn't move, didn't speak. And then, finally, he wiped a hand over his face, his voice barely audible. I don't know if I can forgive you yet. But I'm here. Aaron broke then, a sound leaving him that was half sob, half relief. He nodded, as if even the smallest chance at redemption was more than he deserved. Matthew stood abruptly. I need time. But at least now I know where you are. He looked at me then, his expression unreadable. Take care of him. And then he left, the door clicking shut behind him. Aaron sat frozen on the couch, tears streaking his face. I moved beside him slowly, resting a hand on his back. He collapsed against me, his whole body trembling. I thought I lost him forever, he whispered. You didn't, I said softly. He came to find you. That means something. He pulled back just enough to look at me, his eyes raw, searching. Daniel, what if I can't fix this? What if it's too late for me and him, for everything? I cupped his face gently, my thumb brushing away a tear. It's not too late. Not with him. Not with me. You just have to keep showing up. His lips parted, like he wanted to say something more, but the words caught in his throat. The space between us throbbed with everything unspoken. His eyes searched mine, desperate, vulnerable, and before either of us could overthink, he whispered, Don't leave me too. I'm not going anywhere, I promised. But even as I said it, I knew the hardest part was still ahead, facing the storm of rebuilding a family torn apart by silence and regret. The apartment felt different the next morning, as if the air itself had been rearranged by what had happened the night before. I woke early, my body heavy with exhaustion but my mind wide awake, tracing every word, every tear, every silence between Aaron and his brother. The world outside was quiet, the city not yet fully alive, and in that hush, I turned to see Aaron still asleep on the couch, curled beneath the blanket I'd draped over him. His face looked younger, almost childlike, as though sleep had peeled away years of burden. I made coffee, the smell filling the small space, and when he stirred, his eyes blinked open slowly. For a moment, he seemed disoriented. Then memory rushed back, and I saw the weight settle over him again. He came, Aaron whispered, as if testing whether it had been real. I nodded gently. He came. And he's not gone forever. That matters. Aaron sat up, running a hand through his messy hair. His voice was low. I don't know if I can ever make it right. I don't even know if he wants me in his life. I sat across from him, coffee steaming between us. Maybe it's not about making it perfectly right. Maybe it's about showing him you're still here. That you're not going to disappear again. He met my eyes then, and for the first time in days, there was a flicker of determination. Fragile but real. I'm scared, he admitted. Scared he'll never forgive me. Scared I'll fail him again. Scared I'll lose you too. I leaned forward, my voice firm but soft. You won't lose me. I'm here to. And as for your brother, you can't control how long it takes him to heal. All you can do is stand steady when he looks your way. He swallowed hard, nodding. I want to try. The hours passed slowly, and by the afternoon, the apartment felt restless again. Aaron paced, stopping at the window, then back to the couch, then to the door. He was waiting, hoping, for Matthew to return. But the knock never came. As evening fell, I coaxed him outside. The city lights flickered to life, casting long glows across the sidewalks. We walked in silence, the cool night brushing our faces. At the park nearby, Aaron sat on a bench and stared at the empty basketball court where teenagers played earlier that day. I used to play with him, he said suddenly, his voice breaking the quiet. We'd sneak out to the park at night, pretend the court was ours. He always said as long as we had each other, we could take on the world. He smiled bitterly. And then I left him to take it on alone. I placed my hand on his, steady and firm. Then show him you still believe in those words. Show him you're still his brother. He turned to me, his expression raw. And you? Why are you still here after everything you've seen? The question hung heavy, but my answer came easily. Because I see you, Aaron. Not the man who ran, not the man who hides, but the man who's still fighting to be better. And I love that man. He inhaled sharply, his eyes widening as if my words had cracked something open inside him. His lips trembled. Daniel, don't say that unless you mean it. I mean every word, I said. For a long moment he just stared at me, the night wrapping around us like a shield. And then, quietly, he leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine. I don't deserve this, he whispered. Maybe not, I answered, brushing my thumb over his knuckles. But sometimes love isn't about deserving. Sometimes it's about being willing to start again. We stayed there in silence, the world moving quietly around us. Aaron's breathing slowed, his body softening against mine, and in that fragile stillness, I felt something shift. He wasn't healed, not fully. His brother hadn't forgiven him yet. His past was still jagged. But he wasn't running anymore. He was facing it. When we returned to the apartment, Aaron stopped at the door before going in. He turned to me, his eyes shining in the dim hallway light. If he never forgives me, if I never fix what I broke, will you still stay? I held his gaze, my answer steady. Yes. Because we're building something here too. And I believe in us. Aaron's chest rose and fell sharply, as if my words had given him permission to breathe differently. He nodded, a faint, shaky smile tugging at his lips. That night, he didn't sleep on the couch. He lay beside me, our shoulders brushing in the dark, the silence filled with more peace than it had in weeks. And as his hand found mine beneath the blanket, I realized something. Love wasn't just about dramatic declarations or perfect endings. Sometimes it was about choosing each other, over and over, even in the quiet, messy spaces. Aaron still had a long road ahead with his brother. I knew the wounds wouldn't vanish overnight. But for the first time, I believed he could walk that road without collapsing. And I would be there, step by step. As I drifted toward sleep, Aaron whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Thank you for not giving up on me." And in that moment I knew I never would.